What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be giving you my top 10 for the most accurate Transformers movie figures that have been released over the past 13 years. I personally cannot believe that the first live action Transformers movie directed by Michael Bay turns 13 years old this year. It's absolutely crazy, and in order to celebrate it, I thought that it would be fantastic for me to give you my ranking on some of the best figures that we've ever got out of the 5 Michael Bay live action movies. Now for this particular list I will be excluding movie masterpiece figures as well as third party figures. The reasoning behind why I'm doing this is because masterpiece figures aim to be the most accurate, and I merely just want to focus on mass retail products, as some of those are almost as good as masterpiece figures, which I'm sure you'll be able to see within this video. Now of course, over the past 13 years we have got some phenomenal figures, so probably not all of your favourites will be on this list. However, I hope that at least a few of them will definitely pop up. So without further ado, let's move on to my 10th pick for one of the most accurate Transformers movie figures ever. Crashing into 10th spot and making an enormous sound with it, we have the Transformers Studio Series Revenge of the Fallen Voyager Class Long Haul. Now I'm sure there will be many of you that are completely puzzled as to why I've put Long Haul on the 10th spot, seeing as he is such a recent figure. However, this figure looks incredible. If you compare Long Haul's robot mode to that of the actual CGI render that we see within the Revenge of the Fallen movie, it is almost a perfect match. The fact that this figure can actually transform is mind-blowing. If Hasbro were to upscale this into the masterpiece format, quite honestly I would probably be forgiven for thinking that this was actually a masterpiece figure. The level of detail is truly exquisite, the paintwork is remarkable, and although he may be lacking in terms of articulation, he more than makes up for it in terms of his bulk. This figure absolutely dominates the Transformers Studio Series line as being one of the best Voyagers to ever pop up. This one really, in my opinion, is one of the most accurate figures we have ever gotten. Coming into orbit at spot number 9 is of course the Transformers Hunt for the Decepticons Voyager Class The Fallen, a figure that is in my opinion truly underrated by the Transformers movie collectors. This figure to me is astonishing, one of the best to come out of the 2009/2010 era. If you actually compare this figure to the CGI model, it is almost perfect. The only thing which of course slightly deterred collectors from actually picking this one up was its ghastly awful colour scheme. I still to this day have no idea why Hasbro painted this in a purple and turquoise blue, but nevertheless, set the colour scheme aside and actually look at the detail of the figure. It is fantastic. Now this figure does have one advantage over the majority of the figures on this list, and that was that the Fallen never actually transformed within the movies, so the designers over at Hasbro literally just had to focus solely on getting that robot mode pixel accurate, and I think that they did an exceptionally good job, especially with the Hunt for the Decepticons version. Now I chose this version over the original ROTF one as this actually has the remolded head sculpt which is articulated and definitely a lot more accurate, and you can actually remove the Fallen's face to reveal the internal endoskeleton, which of course we see in the final act of Revenge of the Fallen. A figure that in my eyes deserves so much more praise than it actually gets, and that is why it has taken the 9th spot on one of the most accurate Transformers movie figures to date. Safeguarding the 8th spot on my list goes to the Studio Series 49 Deluxe Class Bumblebee. Of course I had to put a Bumblebee on this list, and for me, the newest Camaro rendition from the Studio Series had to take the cake of being the most accurate. If you actually have this figure in hand, it is almost masterpiece level in terms of the complexity of the transformation. The details and the accuracy in the robot mode to me are sublime. For a deluxe class priced between £20 to £22, I think that you most certainly get the bang for your buck with this release. The removable cannon just adds so much life to this figure. I actually really love the battle mask as well. I've always been a fan of B's battle mask. The articulation is great, the transformation incredibly complex and enjoyable, and the actual Camaro itself is really faithful to what we actually saw within that movie. I think that this also is one of the figures that gets slightly overlooked by collectors, seeing as the market has been so saturated with Bumblebee figures, they tend to skip out on some of the Studio Series versions, but I definitely do think that this one has got to be the best deluxe class Bumblebee Hasbro have ever done. It beats the Human Alliance version, and in my opinion is definitely up there with the masterpiece. Of course, it is just at a considerably smaller scale, so definitely safeguarding the 8th spot had to go to this rendition of Bumblebee. Swinging in at spot number 7 goes to the Revenge of of the Fallen, Human Alliance, Skids and Mudflap. And yes, I know that these two are two separate figures, but you cannot have one without the other, and I think that they are both equally as great as one another. Now, these two held the 7th spot for being the most accurate for me, as I personally do believe that the Human Alliance line, until the Masterpiece line, was one of the most faithful lines that we ever got. These two figures look really accurate to their on-screen movie appearance, and I think that just in terms of the overall enjoyability of them, they are also very, very well done. You take Skids and Mudflap and you see some parts that may look similar, however these were completely different molds, and both of them had very different transformations, yet both appeared in very similar alt forms and very similar robot modes. I think Hasbro back in the day did a great job on their Human Alliance line, and it's such a shame that that line hasn't continued further down the line. I thought that these figures here definitely could be displayed on a shelf and be mistaken for official Masterpiece figures. We had the gimmicks that the mouths could move, they came with some really cool actual miniature Human Alliance figures. I also believe that they came with RC and Chromia, which was fantastic, and their transformations incredibly involved. Hasbro nailed the likeness on these. You're able to have so much fun with this, and these two figures even made a cameo in my most recent Transformers Studio Series Devastator stop motion. Slicing his way into the 6th spot goes to the Studio Series Revenge of the Fallen Voyager class Megatron. Now, I don't know whether it is because we got an incredibly lackluster leader class figure of Megatron in the ROTF toy line, but this figure truly was a breath of fresh air when it came to the second movie rendition of Megatron. This version here is almost pixel accurate to what we actually saw within that movie. This figure's proportions were on point. I absolutely loved the more proportionate fusion cannon that had the retractable blade. I thought that the articulation was sublime, the transformation very simplistic but definitely effective. Tank mode as well as robot mode looked great. The sculpted in detailing as well, wow, truly up there with some of the MP figures in terms of the detail. The only thing that was slightly lackluster about this was his colour scheme. However, this version of Megatron was more or less a zombie, as he was resurrected from reused dead parts, so I guess you can excuse the rather bland looking colour scheme, but for me, this definitely takes a very strong 6th place, as this version of Megatron could quite frankly be one of the best that we ever got at the mass retail market. Being the halfway split and taking spot number 5 of being the most accurate goes to the Human Alliance Jazz. Now, as stated in the Skids and Mudflap segment, the Human Alliance line in my opinion truly was the Masterpiece line up until the official MP line was introduced. This version here was the most accurate rendition of Jazz for many, many years, and despite the significantly more accurate Masterpiece version now making its debut, I've honestly got to say that I much prefer the Human Alliance version. I just think that figure's so much more enjoyable in terms of posing him around in robot mode, the transformation into his vehicle mode. These figures really were an intermediate between an incredibly high-end product and a very fun child's toy. I found myself having so much fun with this figure back in the day. Nice touches such as the motorbike that converted into the gun, the flip-up visor, and the really neat introduction of bringing a small human figure truly made these figures some of the best Transformers on the market. Jazz here is very accurate in his robot mode and equally accurate in his Pontiac Solstice alt form. I honestly can't sing this figure's praises high enough, and if it was for me, I would actually put this figure further up the list. However, with my hand on my heart, I know that some of the figures higher up on the list are slightly more accurate than this one, hence why he takes 5th spot. Parachuting his way into the 4th spot goes to the Studio Series Leader Class Shockwave. Now, believe me, this too is a figure that would also be considerably higher up on the list. However, this figure does have a slight advantage over some of the last few figures on the list, being that he once again, similarly to the Fallen, never had an alt form in the movies, so therefore Hasbro and the designers could solely focus on getting his robot mode 100% accurate, and personally for me, I really think they did. I think that this is one of the best Studio Series figures that we have ever gotten. Not only was the sculpt work and the actual faithfulness to the actual movie CGI design spot on, but the paintwork too was truly remarkable for a mass retailed figure. It had almost this purple dry brush effect, which in some lights seemed considerably darker than it did in other lights, which I thought was super cool, as if you wished for the purple tint to be more predominant, depending on the lighting you had him in, it really could be. And this figure also had some incredible details. The head sculpt was fantastic, the whole rib cage section too was remarkable, the fusion cannon really detailed and accurate, and the articulation is also sublime. This is one of my favourite Studio Series figures for many reasons, but definitely the level of accuracy is the main one. Deceiving his way into spot number 3 goes to the Transformers Hunt for the Decepticons Leader Class Starscream. a figure which in my eyes is still yet to be dethroned as one of the best movie Starscream figures of all time. Now I know that the Masterpiece 10 is going to be a Starscream, and that will most likely make this figure redundant, but for the most part this figure in my eyes is a masterpiece already. It was even so good that Takara Tomy even labelled this and repainted it as a masterpiece way back in 2010/2011. This figure in his robot mode is near pixel perfect in terms of how accurate he is to the film. Some of the gimmicks such as the pop-out Gatling guns and pop-out missiles really make this figure a very fun action figure. The articulation as well was way beyond anything we had gotten prior to this in terms of the leader class. He had movable butterfly joints in the arms, fully ratcheted legs as well as arms, hinge joints, swivel joints, and I actually thought that his Mech Alive gimmick was one of the best. This figure's whole head as well as cockpit assembly lit up in a really menacing red colour, and he would admit various different Decepticon phrases. The transformation on this figure too was also very complex, and it resulted in a really faithful looking F-22 Raptor alt form. I also love this version because not only is this one of the more accurate figures, but this version actually has the alien tattoos. I've always preferred Starscream with the Cybertronian alien tattoos, as I just think it makes his character design look slightly more interesting, and this version here captures what he looked like in the film. For me, perfect. This is no doubt one of my favourite figures to come out of the last 13 years of Michael Bay films, and I honestly think that the Masterpiece figure has got some tough competition if it wishes to dethrone this bad boy. Leading the way into freedom and taking the second runner-up spot of the top 10 most accurate figures goes to the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen / Dark of the Moon Leader Class Optimus Prime mold. Now, what can I say? This figure for many years among all of the Transformers movie collectors was actually one of the best figures of all time. I haven't found an Optimus Prime that has actually topped this that has been released by Hasbro and Takara. I think that the Masterpiece version that they put out a few years back has nothing on this. This is better than that in my opinion, and I know that's going to be subjective to a lot of criticism, but I just think that this was such a well-made figure. The robot mode was so solid. It was at a very reasonable price point. The transformation complex, so complex that I actually believe that this is the reason why some of the later movie lines were slightly simplified, because all of the parents were actually complaining about how complex this was. The truck mode was fantastic. The Peterbilt semi-truck will always be my all-time favourite design of Optimus Prime for an alt form, and in terms of a robot mode, this is already my all-time favourite. Nothing for me will ever beat this version of Optimus Prime, unless you start to factor in some third-party figures, but setting those aside and focusing solely on movie figures and mass-release figures, this one takes the cake of being the best Optimus Prime figure of all time. And did I mention this had a fantastic Mech Alive gimmick where you could actually make him state his name, and it was an actual voice recording by Peter Cullen himself. For me, this figure cannot get any better, and this is the best Optimus Prime ever. Owning the entire Transformers Studio Series line and taking the first spot of being my personal favourite and the most accurate Transformers movie figure of all time goes to the Studio Series Leader Class Grimlock. Of course Grimlock had to take the first spot. If you actually compare this robot mode to a CGI render of Grimlock, you cannot tell them apart, and that's not me joking whatsoever. This version was fantastic. If Hasbro just put this in a Masterpiece format and added a couple of extra steps to perhaps simplify some of the kibble on his arm, you would honestly think that this was fresh out of the movie. It literally looks as if though Grimlock has jumped straight from the screen and into plastic form. Robot mode, he looks sublime, truly faithful to what we see on screen, and I also think that that is due to him having a fantastic paint scheme. This figure actually was one of the first to have a truly remarkable paint scheme at the mass retail market. The dry brushing effect that Hasbro and Takara used on this was something that I don't believe we'd ever seen previously on any of the movie figures, and it definitely complemented this version of Grimlock really, really nicely. The transformation for a leader class was quite simplistic, which is why I believe the dinosaur mode not to be as accurate as it could be, but actually looking at the dinosaur mode, I don't think that's too bad either. But focusing primarily on his robot mode, this is definitely one of the most accurate movie figures. I can't really think of anything else that could dethrone this other than some of the actual Masterpiece figures or some third-party figures. This figure here is probably the best Studio Series figure of all time, and in terms of leader class, it is probably one of the most accurate leaders of all time. So that is why I believe the Studio Series Grimlock is the most accurate figure ever. So that was my top 10 most accurate Transformers movie figure list. Personally for me, I thoroughly enjoyed taking a look at some of the older figures and seeing where they still rank up to today. Some of these figures are almost 10 years old now, or if not, have exceeded that 10 years, and to see them hold up so well truly is remarkable. Some of the engineering on these were fantastic. The Studio Series figures, whilst most of them are rather new, I think the paintwork looks incredible. It's really nice to see how Hasbro have evolved over time, and it's great to see them really back on track with Transformers figures. There was a period where I did think that they were beginning to become too simplified and lose the initial essence of what Transformers figures were, that being Transformers that actually transformed and didn't just have shells on their backs. I really hope that you enjoyed this top 10 list. If you did, please let me know down in the comment section below. Definitely be sure to let me know whether or not you agree with my list and what figures you would swap out with different figures. And until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.